It's May 7th on the calendar, and today we all woke up to the news that another war has started in the world. India and Pakistan have started a new war, the fourth in their history. On the night of May 7th, India carried out airstrikes against Pakistan, and Pakistan responded with artillery fire. India claims that it struck exclusively terrorist and militant targets in the Kashmir region and carefully avoided hitting Pakistani military facilities. India notified its international partners, the United States of America, the United Kingdom, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Russia. Pakistan, on the other hand, claims in this situation that it is ready to use nuclear weapons to counter India. And that's exactly where the main problem lies. After Britain effectively created India and Pakistan in 1947, there have already been 3 wars between them, but all of them were before both countries acquired nuclear weapons. Now escalation seems inevitable, but it's not all that clear-cut. In this episode, we'll look into the origins of the conflict between India and Pakistan and review the latest news from the region, as well as analyze how high the risk is of a new full-scale war between the two nuclear states. I'm Alexei Pechi, and today is May 7th. Let's thoroughly examine this story. And before you start watching this episode, I encourage you to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and write a comment. This will help YouTube's algorithms show this episode to a larger audience. Well, you can also support the work of this channel financially through donations or by subscribing to sponsorship on YouTube. All links and payment details are in the video description or via the quick response code on your screens. So, as you already know from my previous episode on the YouTube channel Alexei Pechi, explosions occurred in 3 regions of Pakistan on the night of May 7th. Later, the Indian military announced the start of Operation Sindor, a military operation aimed against terrorist infrastructure in Pakistan. The Ministry of Defense of India states that strikes were carried out on 9 sites in Pakistan, and all of them were allegedly terrorist targets. The statement claims that the Indian army avoided striking Pakistani military targets, thereby demonstrating significant restraint. Allegedly, Pakistan has no reason to get involved in this war. The strikes were not against the Pakistani army, but against militant targets. But still, India did cross some red lines, and the Ministry of Defense of Pakistan confirmed the strikes from India. And later, Pakistani military officials stated that for the first time in 50 years, India had carried out strikes on 5 Pakistani settlements outside the disputed Kashmir region. Pakistani military officials said that the strikes hit 5 settlements: Kotli, Ahmedpur, Sharki, Muzaffarabad, Bak, and Muridki. Why for the first time in 50 years? Because it was in the 1970s that the last third war between India and Pakistan took place, which greatly changed the political and geographical landscape of this region. It was in 1971 that a state called Bangladesh appeared on the map, although this territory had long been a part of Pakistan. But the issue of the disputed territories of Kashmir was still not resolved at that time. Let's return to the recent Indian attacks on Pakistan. Among them, the attacks on Ahmedpur and Muridka are the most significant, since these cities are located in the Pakistani province of Punjab. It borders India, but it is not a disputed territory in any way. That is, according to international law, it is absolutely the territory of Pakistan. And therefore, even if you take into account all the disputed issues and do not take the side of any of the parties claiming Kashmir, and by the way, there are 3 of them. A little later, I'll explain why this attack can already be considered an assault on Pakistan. A state of emergency was declared in Punjab. Well, correspondents on the ground citing sources in the Pakistani forces report that after the attack, at least 1 child was killed and 2 more people were injured. Near Bahawalpur, it is currently impossible to verify this information, as there are simply no independent sources. It's clear that each side will now be proclaiming its own version of the truth. For example, the Pakistani television channel Sama Television reported that as a result of the strike on the madrasa in Bahawalpur, at least 20 people were injured and all of them were hospitalized. It's crucial to note that the television channel has close ties to the Pakistani government, as it's owned by Alim Khan, Pakistan's Minister of Communications. At night, a rescue operation began in Bahawalpur and the authorities declared a state of emergency in all the city's hospitals. Pakistani authorities later reported that 7 people had died. But it's important to note that the same television channel, Samaya Television, announced at night that Pakistan had allegedly shot down 2 Indian Air Force planes. These were French Rafale planes. The television channel showed a photo of a downed plane as proof, but it was later revealed to be fake, with the image being at least a couple of years old. Later, Sama Television reported that Pakistan launched a retaliatory strike on undisclosed targets in India, but decided not to provide specifics on which targets were hit. What is known for sure right now is that India is attacking Pakistan using French Rafale jets and is using missiles familiar to us, Storm Shadow and Scalp. Although it was India that for a long time bought simply a huge amount of weapons specifically from the Russians. Later, in addition to airstrikes, there were reports of fighting on the border. Pakistani troops began using artillery in the area of the line of control in Kashmir. And then suddenly the Indian army declares that in this way Pakistan has once again been the first to violate the ceasefire agreement by opening artillery fire. They say that airstrikes are a bit of a different matter. Looking ahead, I'll say that in 2021, India and Pakistan agreed to a ceasefire. But that didn't mean the tension disappeared anywhere. The Pakistani Foreign Ministry condemned the blatant act of war, the violation of sovereignty by India, and stated that, according to international law, they have the full right to take retaliatory measures at any time and in any place of their choosing, including the use of nuclear weapons. I should note here that Pakistan still has a more limited arsenal. They have both tactical and strategic nuclear weapons, while India still has a more strategic nuclear arsenal. India has adopted a no first-use nuclear doctrine, while Pakistan has not, allowing them to potentially deliver a first strike with tactical nuclear weapons. In fact, such attention to this conflict is due to the fact that it is a war between 2 nuclear states. Pakistan, according to various estimates, has close to 170 nuclear warheads, while India has 180. Well, on the eve, the Minister of Defense of Pakistan threatened to use nuclear weapons against other countries if Pakistan loses this war, and the world does not react in any way. Well, right now, there are officially 9 countries in the nuclear club, and if you count Iran, which is literally 2 steps away from creating a nuclear warhead, then it's 10. However, in history, there have never been any full-scale wars between 2 nuclear powers, and this escalation could turn into something terrible. You might say, wait, you just said earlier that there have already been 3 wars between India and Pakistan. So can we really say that this is the first time a full-scale war could break out between nuclear states? That's true, but all the full-scale wars between India and Pakistan happened before both countries joined the nuclear club. Pakistan tested its own nuclear weapon for the first time in 1998. But India acquired nuclear weapons just 3 years after the last full-scale war with Pakistan, that is, in 1974. It was exactly at that time when Pakistan lost control over Bangladesh and when that country declared its independence. And that's when a country called the People's Republic of Bangladesh appeared on the map. Now, while a conflict is unfolding at the border, high-ranking Indian officials informed their foreign partners, the United States, the United Kingdom, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Russia, about India's actions. And this became such a clear dividing line. Who is with India and who is with Pakistan? The Embassy of India in the United States echoes the country's Ministry of Defense. They stated that the strikes were planned in such a way as to avoid escalation, and no one in the United States argued with that. Pakistan formally supports China, but so far China is reacting to the situation very cautiously and is not making any promises. Just like Russia, by the way, because India is still the main importer of oil from Russia. Let me make a small lyrical digression here. I can assume that Russia itself is now at a crossroads. On the one hand, after the conflict between Pakistan and India began, oil prices went up a bit and further price increases are being predicted. If the war drags on, Moscow would seem to benefit from such a situation and, as they say, could add fuel to the fire. On the other hand, India is worried about its oil refineries on the border with Pakistan because of missile attacks. India has already announced that it will strengthen the protection of refineries in Jamnagar, Vadinar and other states on the border with Pakistan. It is noted that the air defense has been brought to the highest state of readiness. And I would like to emphasize here that the oil refineries located in these territories bordering Pakistan are collectively responsible for 38% of all Indian oil refining. We are talking about refineries in Jamnagar, Adinar, Batinga in Punjab and the Barmer oil field in Rajasthan. Accordingly, if these facilities are damaged, India will definitely reduce its oil purchases from Russians. Let's return to the current escalation. The potential for conflict has long been discussed. Back on April 28th, official Pakistani representatives stated that an Indian invasion was inevitable. Relations between the countries reached the brink of war after militants killed 26 tourists in the Indian city of Pahalgam on April 22nd. This is the bloodiest terrorist attack in India since the Islamist assault on Mumbai in 2008. Eyewitnesses say that the attackers allegedly asked the tourists whether they were Hindus or Muslims, and those who were Hindus were shot on the spot. And this is a very important point that reveals to us the very essence of the conflict. Hindus or Muslims? Remember this moment for now. We'll revisit it later. Responsibility for this attack on Pahalgam was claimed by the so-called Resistance Front. This is a little-known unit of the jihadist group Lashkar-e-Taiba, which is based in the Pakistani part of Kashmir. And here we have reached the most important moment. The declared goal of the group Lashkar-e-Taiba is the separation of Kashmir from India. And Kashmir is a disputed region over which India and Pakistan have been in conflict for almost 80 years, throughout their entire existence. The immediate reason for the terrorist attack on April 22nd, as stated by the terrorists, was that the Indian authorities began to issue construction permits en masse in Kashmir. It is expected that more than 80,000 people could be resettled there. Of course, those who will settle in this part of Kashmir will be migrants from other parts of India. And mainly, of course, these will be Hindus, which will change the religious composition of the disputed region. If you look at the Middle East, you will see at least one such similar case with permission for construction and resettlement. Indian authorities did not officially state Pakistan's involvement in the April 22nd terrorist attack, but they implied they hold them at least partially responsible. They stated that they understand it is terrorists acting, not the Pakistani authorities, not the Pakistani military, but that Pakistan could somehow limit the activities of these terrorists, and that Pakistan supposedly does not do this at all. On April 23rd, the day after the terrorist attack in Pahalgam, India closed its border with Pakistan and cancelled all visas issued to Pakistanis. They were ordered to leave India within 3 days. Islamabad introduced retaliatory measures. They closed the border for people and cargo, and the authorities of Pakistan also closed their airspace to Indian airlines. Both sides mutually expelled many diplomats and also threatened each other with withdrawal from bilateral agreements on the ceasefire and the joint use of the waters of the Indus River. As a result, India did withdraw from the latest agreement, and already on May 4th, India cut off the water supply to Pakistan on the Chenab River. In general, the roots of the current tension between India and Pakistan go back to the late 80s. That's if you don't dig too deep. Back then, in the late 80s, Muslim separatist groups appeared in Kashmir, advocating for the region's independence or, at the very least, its separation from India. Indian authorities now accuse Pakistan of supporting these groups, while Islamabad denies the accusation, although it does not hinder their activities. And these very Muslim groups regularly carry out terrorist attacks on Indian territory. Usually, New Delhi limited itself to diplomatic condemnation of Pakistan and still did not go for escalation. But a lot changed in 2016. That year, the Indian government began to respond with strikes. In 2019, the situation escalated even further when, after another terrorist attack, India carried out an airstrike on a suspected militant camp in Pakistani territory. The day after the strike, Pakistan downed an Indian jet and captured its pilots. Then there was a brief lull, but it didn't last long. And already in 2021, India and Pakistan agreed to a ceasefire. But this ceasefire seemed as if it didn't apply to the groups. And after 21 years, in Indian Jammu and Kashmir, attacks were happening every few months. But there was one important difference. After all, the militants attacked Indian military or police. The attacks were not aimed at civilians. That's exactly why this April terrorist attack is very different from what has been happening in the region in recent years. And that's partly why India reacted so sharply and strongly. Like an attack on Hindus is already too much. By late 2023, warnings were being issued about a potential military conflict in Kashmir. Why? Because at that time, the Supreme Court of India stripped the region of its autonomous status and its own constitution. Let me explain what that means. Before that, until 2023, there was a formal parliament in Kashmir that voted on decisions made in New Delhi. All these decisions were usually approved, but nevertheless, such a body existed. But the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, actually promised during his election campaign to take away such autonomy from Kashmir, which he did. And later, the Supreme Court of India began to talk about the settlement of 80,000 people in Kashmir. In the part of Kashmir controlled by India, repressions against the Muslim opposition unfolded, and experts warned about the possible preparation for a military conflict. The militants, who advocate for Kashmir's independence, stated that this is genocide and that India wants to expel Muslims from these territories. Overall, as I mentioned, there have already been 3 wars between India and Pakistan because of Kashmir. The first one started right after the partition of the British colony into India and Pakistan in 1947. At that time, the British decided to grant independence to British India, but not to leave it as a single state. Instead, they divided it along religious lines. Territories with a Muslim majority became Pakistan, and territories with a Hindu majority became India. But it so happened that within British India there were so-called provinces and princely states, 562 of them, and one of those princely states was Kashmir. The princely states were told to join the country with which they shared a geographical border, or to which they were adjacent. And some princely states could choose for themselves which territory they would ultimately join. The territories were mostly divided peacefully. But both newly formed countries, India and Pakistan, wanted Kashmir for themselves. And inside the princely state of Kashmir itself, various political factions had conflicting plans, joining India, joining Pakistan, or seeking independence. And in the end, it turned out that at that moment, the head of this principality decided that it should join India, while the majority of the population decided that it should actually join Pakistan. And it seems that legally they joined India, but the population was always against it. This is what led to the armed conflict and the First Indo-Pakistani War, during which India captured 2/3 of Kashmir. By the way, the name of the country Pakistan is actually an acronym made up of the names of 5 regions, and the letter K in the word Pakistan stands for Kashmir. So Kashmir is literally sewn into the name of the country Pakistan. And Islamabad is unlikely to give this up. Don't forget that part of Kashmir is controlled by China, which is on Pakistan's side. And at one point, Pakistan handed over a small piece of Kashmir to China. This happened in the 1960s. And this eternal conflict between India and Pakistan over this piece of land is beneficial to China. Because first of all, neither victorious side comes to the Chinese for a part of Kashmir, and secondly, India is an enemy of China, and China itself doesn't really want to fight India with its own hands. The India-Pakistan War lasted from October 1947 to December 1948. The next 2 conflicts happened in 1965 and 1971. And neither of the last conflicts resolved the Kashmir issue. However, during the Third Indo-Pakistani War, the state of Bangladesh appeared on the map. At that time, India sided with the Bangladeshi partisans, and Pakistan lost this territory. But in fact, already in 2001, a small war broke out between India and Bangladesh, again over disputed territories, but that's another story. Whether this conflict will grow into a 4th Indo-Pakistani War is too early to say. The international community will undoubtedly strive to extinguish the flames of war, as a nuclear conflict serves no one's interests. Meanwhile, in India, there are indications of triumph over the terrorists, suggesting that further fighting is unnecessary. Meanwhile, the Pakistani authorities are talking about an imminent ground invasion by India. India stresses it does not aim to escalate the conflict and only attacked militant targets as a show of force. The international community has so far only managed to express concern and anxiety, and United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres stated that the world cannot afford a military confrontation between India and Pakistan. United States President Donald Trump called the escalation of the conflict between the countries a disgrace and expressed hope that the conflict would be resolved as soon as possible. I think Trump's role here is very telling, because he declared that as long as he is in office, wars will not start, and he will establish peace throughout the world. Just 100 days into his presidency, a new serious war is already starting. Moreover, he still couldn't stop Russia's war against Ukraine. And all attempts to stop the war in the Gaza Strip ended with Israel now only expanding its ground offensive in the Gaza Strip. The United States and India are now partners and allies. There is hope that Washington will convince New Delhi not to escalate the conflict after all, and New Delhi seems to be showing that it does not intend to go for this escalation. For now, I'll leave it at that and continue to follow the developments. So don't forget to subscribe to this channel as well as to my channel. There, the latest news comes out very quickly. It's been tested, so the link to this channel is in the description of this video. Be sure to subscribe and of course leave your comments under this episode. It really helps promote this video. That's all for now. Take care of yourself.